And you better talk to me nicely. Next to blow, little bitch, I might be. Oh. Can't forget all the days they overpriced me. So now that we up, don't get advice, we know. Talk to me nicely.
It is I, Hope.Disguised, and I'm coming at you all today with another video because I have thoughts. So recently, Laverne Cox went on to The Breakfast Club where, you know, Charlamagne, DJ MV, and so many of the rest of the folks that are always on The Breakfast Club have been known to have problematic conversations surrounding transgender people.
You are taking away a person's power of choice.
Yeah.
When you don't tell them up front. That's why when Janet Mock was there, she said she tells
There should be
all,
some type of repercussions for that if you do
you
that
should
to
go
somebody.
to jail or something.
Something.
Some
like,
charges be pressed.
So
When Janet Mock was
until
there-
then, I'm going to have my own repercussions, okay?
But you can't go around killing transgenders.
I'm not going to kill transgenders. I didn't say, see, here you go trying to flip my words. I didn't say I'm going to kill transgenders. I said, if one did that to me.
If you had sex with one and then they didn't
and they
reveal it
didn't
was a
tell
boy.
me, I'm going to be so mad, I'm probably going to want to kill them.
And honestly, this is the first time that I can say the conversation that was had was the conversation that needed to be had. Howsoever, let's dissect and break it down. So this time they had none other than Laverne Cox, and I think that for the most part, she handled it, right? Like she had the conversations that needed to be had, talked about all the things that are important to us, like really broke things down in a way for them that humanized us. And she really talked a lot about what it meant to like show grace and, you know, to really come from a space of like love at all times. Even when the people that you're coming to the space don't love you back. I think that Laverne really did a great job at reminding folks that it's not about what they give to you. It's about the ways in which you want to kind of sort of, you know, move through the world for your own sense of morale, for your own sense of feeling like a piece of this rock that we all call home. And there was something beautiful about watching the way that she navigated even like the slight shadiest of moments.
Talk to us about this outfit because it's giving black superhero.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for asking.
But I have to break down and talk about the fact that I think that the Breakfast Club is bad at having these conversations because you have people who you're never really sure where they're coming from and what to take serious from them ever. I never know when Charlamagne is playing. I never know when Charlamagne is serious. With Jess Hilarious, I will say that like I had unfollowed Jess for a while. I didn't block her like I tend to do. And it's just because I understood that a lot of her antics were supposed to be comedic. And I didn't think that there was malice, but I still felt like she should have known better. And so in this particular conversation, I feel like the Breakfast Club gets it wrong a lot of the time because when we're having these conversations, it's hard to see past who these people are and why they're famous and what they're famous for when we're having a conversation that's fairly, you know, like kind of serious because we're talking about people's human identities. Like, fuck all of the rest of the semantics and the things of that nature. We're talking about the ways in which we should treat people like people. And this particular conversation that surrounds transgender people on the Breakfast Club, there's always been a nuance or a tinge of what the fuck did y'all do and why did y'all choose this person out of all the people? And so for me, when Laverne got on there, one of the first things that I realized was that I am judgy. And I had to like take into account the reason why I was feeling the things that I was feeling. I am so judgmental.
You know what that is? It's gross.
And I think that I'm judgmental specifically of the ways in which Black people show up in general. And especially when Black trans people are showing up in spaces that we know are likely to be transphobic, that are likely to take your words and turn them into something else, in spaces that are likely to have negativity associated with them. It's always gonna be my goal to read the room and see who's in that room and then respond accordingly so that they can receive everything that I have. And I think that within the first 15 seconds of Laverne opening her mouth, I was just like, no, they're gonna eat my baby alive. They're gonna eat Auntie alive. They're gonna take my good sis up and through there. And it's just because Laverne is so unapologetically her, and no matter what space she goes through, that sometimes it makes you cringe. It's like when you bring your white friend to the cookout and for some reason, on any other given day, they don't sound like your white friend, right? Like when you're just out, when you're just maneuvering through the world with them and you're in your own little silo, in your little bubble where you created this friendship with this white person, they just sound like Sarah to you. But when you bring Sarah to your family cookout, next to Uncle Earl and Auntie Cheryl, Sarah sounds like, oh my God, like, oh my, yeah, because I love potato salad, you know, and there's something that's cringy about that for you because now you remember that Sarah is your white friend. It's like on the way there and after you gave her the invite, you knew that she was your white friend, right? But it's just like you don't, or you're not hip to remembering that this was your white friend until they're compared next to your black ass family that's playing spades over here in the corner and your little nephew Darren who refuses to leave this white girl alone because of the colonial nature in which he's been taught to believe that white women are just this beautiful thing, and so now he all up in her face, but that's another video. And so for like the first 15 seconds, as soon as Laverne opened her mouth, I was like, they about to eat her alive because they know she don't belong here. And when I say that, they know that she doesn't belong here. What I'm saying is this. When it comes down to urban media, and Laverne spoke on this, right? When it comes down to urban media, Laverne doesn't thrive in those spaces. Laverne doesn't thrive in spaces where, you know, 50 Cent and Nicki Minaj and K. Michelle have gone on this show, you know, and going ham and crazy. Like Laverne does not thrive in those spaces. And I think that it's because much like Todrick Hall, who, like I told y'all in my last video, I love, Laverne is one of those black people that doesn't necessarily seem to, because I know Laverne on a less personal note, right? And so I'm saying seem to because while we've had extensive conversations, you know, personally, I'm not integrated into her friend group enough to like know this for sure. I do know that Laverne has a bunch of black trans, you know, women friends, but beyond that, I don't believe that her circle encompasses a bunch of black people. And if so, not a bunch of black people that are rooted in the culture in the way that a myself or a T.S. Madison or an Angelica Ross might be inundated in the culture. And so it was one of those things where it was just like this knee-jerk reaction where I immediately rolled my eyes because I was like, on top of the transphobia, it's also going to give that, why she talk like a white girl? And in the midst of all of that, I had to check myself because I was like, first and foremost, like, who the fuck made me Queen Elizabeth, you know? And also, why am I projecting this, like, negative energy about the way that she's going to be received by people when I don't know how she's going to be received by people? But I think that as a black trans woman, and especially one that has done the work in these spaces and is used to the passive aggression that I often get, even in the best of conversations, I was just worried about how Auntie was going to show up and what the kids was going to give, and especially after they realized that not only was Laverne well-spoken and well-read and intelligent and all of those things, but I was just worried about the way that they were going to try to, the things that they might have said because they thought that she was green. And if you're a black person or if you're a person of color who understands the lingo, you know what I mean. Like, I didn't want them to think that Laverne was green and take advantage of that. Because oftentimes, y'all know, just like Sarah at the barbecue, when they know that Sarah is green, they invite Sarah to come to the spades table and play on the opposition team because they know she don't know no better, or they assume that she don't know no better, right? And so once I got past those feelings of anxiety, like very on in the interview, I was able to realize a couple of different things. The way that they conducted themselves in this interview is much different than the way that they conduct themselves on a regular basis, let alone the way that they conduct themselves with folks like T.S. Madison and Flame Monroe.
Flame will get me in trouble because Flame will say he, she, we, and I'm like,
no, my pronouns are she, her,
you know?
and hers.
So that's why I just be saying Flame. But when does Flame Monroe find anything offensive?
Yes, I
Really?
do.
Okay.
You know what offends me? If you bother my family or my children.
True.
And even the way that they conducted themselves with Janet Mock.
Why is tranny a bad word to say for a transgender? Why is that, you know?
Well, even in the trans community too, the term tranny is one that's even contentious within the community, right? So it's kind of like say nigger or something, right? So like there's some trans women who are completely fine,
Right,
with
and they
using
say
the
it 'cause
term
they use it.
amongst themselves,
Gotcha.
right? But there's something when someone outside of that experience use that terminology, it comes off as more of an epithet than it is
Gotcha.
about a bringing in.
There was this lackadaisical, just kind of sort of like fly-by-night, free-flowing energy when the aforementioned people were on the show. For some reason, when Laverne pulled up to the scene with her still missing, everybody was just kind of like, I'm a tiptoe through the window. And I'm just like, why are we having this conversation where there's a need to kind of sort of just like placate and tread lightly and do all the things? I'm just, in my mind, I feel like as it pertains to the wealth of knowledge, and for so long, the wealth of knowledge around this particular topic has been Laverne. Like Laverne has been the voice. And now you all finally have Laverne the voice, and you're not even like really giving it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted the hard hitting questions, but I think that it was also one of those things where it's just like, respectability politics come into play, right? Where it's just like, well, Laverne is this type of woman, right? We can't ask her these sorts of things, and we can't talk to Laverne this sort of way, and we can't, have this type of conversation. But what I really hate is that they missed a really great opportunity, because Laverne is indeed that type of person. And you can't have those types of conversations with her, because I think that Laverne is also very good at being able to say, that's the end of my comfort level, and moving on, right? And I just feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities to have some real great social conversation. Like, it was awesome and amazing that, as always, Laverne informed the folks about what was happening, legislatively or within the governmental system as it pertains to trans folks and LGBTQIA people. But I feel like socially, there were just a lot of conversation that was missed. I feel like I would have loved to hear Laverne's full thoughts to the Black community as it pertains to disclosure. I would have loved to hear Laverne's full thoughts around the ways in which our bodies are constantly used as a catalyst for the conversation. I would have loved for them to ask Laverne questions about the ways in which, she came up and what it was like truly getting through the trenches as a trans actor. Like, where was the start? I find that everybody else, if there was ever a moment to have a crossover conversation where we got through the nitty-gritty of the social aspects, as well as, give the folks who are watching this because we see something in Laverne. She is a light for us and all of these things. Giving us that backstory and that history would have been beautiful, and especially for the folks who have no idea who she is, or for the folks who thought that she was just Sophia on, on Orange is the New Black. I feel like Laverne has so much more capacity than what she was used for. And there were a bunch of moments where I feel like, because she is a talker, because she is, media trained and all of these things, Laverne took it upon herself to introduce certain themes to the conversation. And it just wasn't the same as when, they've had other folks and they have the topics and they're ready with the quick comebacks and it's a fun, sort of quick moment. I felt like Laverne had to come out of her shell a lot more than she usually does for this particular interview, because in this particular interview, it was kind of like you felt the energy through the screen just felt tense, and as if people were just kind of sort of trying to figure out what it was. There were questions that you could tell that people wanted to ask. There were moments that you could tell folks wanted to dig deeper and didn't. And I'm very curious as to why that is. You know what I'm saying? I'm very curious as to why we don't get authentic conversations when there are certain people in the room, that are the spokesperson for the moment. I think that a lot of folks are very comfortable kind of sort of, having this ridiculous, over the top, fun, very colloquial conversation with folks like Flame Monroe and T.S. Madison and Angelica, because there is this side of them that they've seen that makes them feel like it's family. And this goes back to my initial point at the beginning of this video, where sometimes when you are stuck in the idea of what Black people are supposed to be in general, whether you're trans, gay, LGBTQIA+, or whatever the case may be, you know, like, there's a way that we feel like we're supposed to see Black people perform and the way that we're supposed to perform as Black people. And when you don't perform in that way, folks decide, right, how they want to interact with you based off of the way that you do perform. And I think that that is what happened here. I love this version of the Breakfast Club's interview. I'm actually very surprised that the comments were mostly positive, at least on the YouTube. But I have to say that I think that when it boils down to it, there were a bunch of like different missed moments. Now, I could make this video about all of the nuances and the things that I heard and like the little off moments of comments and like the different jokes that were being poked, but not quite like they didn't necessarily puncture anything. They kind of just like poked at little things. And if you got it, you got it. You know what I'm saying? But I think that it's more productive for me to take time to ask, like, the audience, what would you all have liked to see, and what would you like to see from the Breakfast Club as it pertains to these conversations? And the way that they have, you know, continued to have the conversation. I think that the Breakfast Club is moving in a new way as it pertains to having conversations around queer people, and especially, you know, when it comes to transgender folks at large. But I do think that when we think about the conversation that needs to be happening on the Breakfast Club and the things that need to be unpacked on the Breakfast Club, we haven't gotten there. And it's either because the people that they have on, they tiptoe around, or they're having too much fun to really dig into the nature of the things. Like, I want to be able to have fun. I want to be able to have a joke. I want to be able to have a lackadaisical, natural conversation. But I also want to be able to get to the nitty gritty of it all. And I feel like the more conversations that the Breakfast Club has around that, the better it will be. And the less that they will feel like, oh, I can't really say this, or I can't really say that, or I have to pretend to be PC, or I have to pretend to feel this way or that way. When I move into these conversations, I always tell people to bring your authentic self, because I'm gonna bring mine, right? And we can decide where or when we draw the line in conversation, because that is how you naturally maneuver, right? When you're having conversations with new people, you know, especially as everyday folks, we go to the grocery store and bump into somebody who has on a nice pair of jeans, and we get to talking, and before you know it, we're in this very robust conversation about, you know, jeans, right? But then that conversation, because it tends to evolve over time, then turns into a space where we then start to talk about things that we're not always used to. We start to talk about things that pinpoint other parts of our existence, right? So it's like, I'm Jewish, or I'm Nigerian, I'm all of these different things. And then you have to draw a line, because at some point in that conversation, the Jewish person says something that's inaccurate. The Jewish person says something that's offensive. The Nigerian person says something that might be a little bit, you know, funny if you were Black or Nigerian, but to them it's like, hold up, wait a minute, I'm not over the Holocaust just yet, right? Like, you gotta calm down. And I think that the more that we have conversations where you start to draw the lines while in conversation respectfully, versus trying to draw a line before you actually get there, we'll have more real conversations about the things that we need to be talking about. We'll be able to explore things in a more real way and have less of this like, oh, I'm gonna talk about this, but I'm gonna talk about this like this, and I gotta make sure I don't offend anybody, and I gotta make sure nobody's mad, and I gotta make sure that regardless of what, like, I leave this conversation without being canceled. There was a section of the conversation where they did talk about cancel culture, and Laverne said that, you know, she doesn't believe in it, she doesn't like it. And I remember Jess Hilarious saying that she was the first like insta famous person to be canceled. I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I remember her like saying things that might have come off as problematic to some people, but I don't remember Jess ever really being canceled. I think that when we live in our own little silo, and when we have our own idea about the way that our life is going, things that feel huge and big and monstrous to us are very like minuscule to other people. Because I had to think back about the situation that Jess was talking about that got her canceled in the first place. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, I remember that, but I don't remember people canceling her. I remember like folks being fair weather fans, right? Like people who loved her and folks who supported her or whatever the case may be took that moment to be like the woke police, right? But I don't think that anybody really was just like, fuck Jess Hilarious, in that bitch's bag, no more shows for her. Like, I don't think that that was the case. And I think that that's another thing that I would have loved to talk about, or I would have loved to hear the take on, and especially as it pertains to somebody who is cancelable at all times just because of her existence, right? I would have loved to hear what Laverne, had to say as it pertains to the topic of what it means to be canceled and who gets canceled and for what reasons. And I think that there is something very interesting when we talk about the conversation of canceling people, when we talk about those who are inherently canceled without us having to say that. Right, like there are some people that are just inherently canceled without us having to move a certain way, because the majority of folks that occupy social space are just not fucking with it, are not feeling it, right? So in a lot of spaces, you got white women that are inherently canceled, period. It don't matter what kind of white woman you are. It don't matter, like what organizations you donate to. It don't matter how many dashikis you done got from, Nairobi or whatever the case may be. Bitch, you're canceled just because of the ways in which we see things in society. And so I think that it would have been really interesting to hear like what we think about like the perpetual and the inherent cancelization of trans women whenever, trans women open, when there's a dialogue around anything that has to do with trans people, whether it's a trans woman or not, trans women are canceled, right? And so it's just like, it's very interesting, and I really wish they would have went there, and I wish that would have been a part of the conversation. But overall, I am really happy with the results of what happened. I think that this is the first time that I was able to stomach a full interview and not really feel any type of way about it. I think that this is the first time that I heard, someone come on and speak about these issues and actually just be like listened to for moments at a time. Like there were times where Laverne had monologues, you know what I'm saying? Like there were little mini vignettes over there, where it was just her speaking. And while I am like lightweight complaining about the fact that there wasn't a lot of back and forth and that there wasn't a lot of like detailing in on the social aspect of it, I will say that I give kudos to the fact that even if they weren't receiving, they gave space for other people who watched the back, the playback like I did, to really formulate our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions and go from there. And if nothing else, I really support Charlamagne, Just Hilarious, and DJ Envy for doing that. There was one comment, and I think that this is like my last point. There was one comment that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Backlash. Like there are people who will take the time to teach. Like I salute like my man David Johns. He'll take the time to teach. But a lot of times they don't feel like they're teaching. They're just upset.
And the reason why the comment rubbed me the wrong way is because it bothers me when there are cishet folks that say things like, well, you give us the opportunity, you teach, right? You teach, you don't mind teaching, you give us the opportunity to learn, you do all of the things. And it's like, hey, it's 2023. Charlamagne, you've been on the radio since before I was alive. You've been living in this world since before I was alive. DJ Envy, so have you. Just Hilarious, you're a little older than me, not much older than me, but y'all have years. There should not still be discourse and conversations around respecting people who ain't done shit to you. And that's where I think that a lot of them fail to realize that people have the right to be annoyed. The same way that we are annoyed with racists and having to tell white people over and over and over and over and over again that like, hey, I'm black, but I didn't kill your mama. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm black, but I didn't pull the plug on your granny. I didn't do any of those things to you. So why is there this vitriol in your heart that seems to be innate for me when you don't even know me? All you know about me is that I'm black. And I'm sick of having to go into spaces with white people and explain to white people why this is a problem and why racism still exists and how it affects me on a regular basis when you see it, right? There's articles, there's shows, there's this, there's that, there's think pieces, there's YouTube videos of aplenty. Like, there's so many different things that dictate this on a regular basis. So yes, as a Black person, when I have to keep coming in here and educating you about the bullshit, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, I'm tired of it, I don't want to do it anymore. And when I come into this space, I might have a little bit of an attitude with you, white person, because you should know better. And I think that what irks me and what bothers me when we do have this conversation with cishet folks is that a lot of cishet folks want to act like they don't get it, right? Like, there's this space of like, oh, you know, they get so angry and they get so mad and they don't want to teach. What is there to teach? If you are in a space where you know that people deserve to be treated fairly, the same way that a white person should understand that you can't be out here saying racist shit and you can't be out here using the N-word and you can't be out here doing these things because it's fucked up, a person shouldn't have to tell you to treat a person correctly or treat a person who's done nothing to you right just because they're gay and you don't like it, right? A person shouldn't have to tell you that trans people are still people, and if they've done nothing wrong to you, you shouldn't have an attitude. But people do, and that's a problem. So it bothers me when you have folks that'll say things like, oh, you know, some of them are just so mad. If people have been calling you out of your name, killing you, beating you up, and doing all of the things, and then trying to legislate against you, oh wait, I forgot. If you're Black, those things have already happened. So it's just like, if people have been doing all of those things and motherfuckers are still trying to pretend like they don't see it happening, wouldn't you be upset? Wouldn't you be a little bit over teaching people how to be a decent person? And that's the only thing that like really irks me, is that folks want queer people, trans people, all of the people to come in with, you know, hands folded on your best behavior to teach them how to be decent. I don't have to teach you how to do this. You just taught your toddler the difference between being respectful and not. Especially in communities of color, and especially in Black households, some of the first things that you learn are about how to treat people and how to be mannerable and how to be respectful. You learn that when you enter somebody else's space, you say good morning, good evening, good night. Fuck you. You don't just come in the house and say nothing, right? And so if we're teaching people all of these different values as Black folk, as ethnic folk, as people in, you know, of the culture, then why is it so hard for us to understand and grasp respect as a basic principle, respect as a basic concept? I don't care that, you know, you have an issue, but I think that if somebody has done nothing to you, if somebody is just minding their business at the mall and you happen to realize that they're a gay man, or if you happen to realize that they're a trans person, or, you know, whatever the case may be, if they've done nothing to you, the reason for having an attitude, or the reason for going in, or the reason for just feeling negative about somebody for absolutely no reason does not make sense. And oftentimes we can see somebody just sitting on a chair and a person will say nothing. But the second that somebody's like, oh, you know he gay, now there's a conversation about it. Now there's all these negative annotations about it. But just 10 minutes ago when he was just sitting there and you knew nothing about that, you had nothing to say about this man. But now that he's gay, you have a plethora of thoughts. You're talking about all, like, you know, like there's so many different things that come with it. And I just feel like that to me is prime time gaslighting. And I think that as Black people, we gotta move away from that. We gotta stop gaslighting people into believing that they can't come with the smoke when we bring the fire, right? Like, that's just not how that works. Y'all let me know down in the comments, you know, how y'all feel about it. Let me know if y'all think that I was too harsh on it. Let me know if that was the truth for y'all. Let me know if I unpacked some things for y'all that y'all were trying to dissect through, and what questions you would have asked if you were a host on The Breakfast Club who had, you know, an hour with Laverne. Like, let me know, like, what do y'all think? Because I think that while it was a great interview, there were so many missed opportunities that I wish would not have been missed. But I'm hoping that on the next go round, we can do, you know, something a little bit better the next time that they bring somebody else there. So I don't know. Y'all let me know. Like I say this time and every time, y'all, peace, love, and hope. And I will see y'all on the next one. Bye, everybody.
And you better talk to me nicely. Next to blow.